The FIA wanted a reset in 2026. What they might have created instead is a monopoly. 3 days in Bahrain. Over 400 laps from Red Bull alone. 0 engine failures. The highest top speed of the entire test. And rivals already admitting they are in another league. But here is the part nobody expected. Several drivers walked away from Bahrain not impressed, but concerned. Because these new cars are forcing them to lift more, manage more, harvest more, and attack less. Telemetry suggests Red Bull were hiding nearly a full second per lap. They did not even use their full qualifying mode. If that is true, the championship fight may already be unbalanced before race 1. And if the regulations were designed to close the grid, Bahrain just exposed the opposite effect. Stay with me, because what Verstappen and others revealed after testing puts the FIA in a very uncomfortable position. Subscribe now, because this story only gets bigger. Let us start with what actually happened on track. Because the numbers matter. Day 1 in Bahrain. 136 laps completed by the RB22. No stoppages. No mechanical panic. No red flags caused by the car. While Ferrari were struggling with overheating issues. While Mercedes were fighting balance instability. Red Bull just kept running. And running. And running. By the end of the 3 days, they had completed more than 400 laps. That is not a flashy headline. That is something more dangerous. Reliability. Because in a brand new regulation cycle, reliability is everything. The Red Bull Ford power unit was supposed to be the question mark. New partnership. New architecture. New hybrid philosophy. Many expected early problems. Instead, there was not a single engine-related red flag. Christian Horner even described the integration as perfect. Now pause for a second. When a completely new power unit arrives and runs flawlessly from day 1, that is not normal. That is preparation at another level. And this is where the first flaw in the 2026 reset begins to show. Because the rules were meant to level the field. But if one team arrives fully prepared, fully reliable, fully optimized, the reset disappears instantly. Then came the speed data. 344 kilometers per hour. The highest top speed of the entire test. Without extreme wing angles. Without visible instability. Which means they are generating efficiency. Downforce without drag. And that leads us to the technical detail that quietly shocked the paddock. The so-called side pod cannon exits. Hot air redirected toward the rear beam wing and diffuser. Creating additional downforce at low speed. Without increasing drag on the straights. It is a modern interpretation of the blown diffuser concept. And it is fully legal under the new rules. That is important. Because this is not about bending regulations. It is about understanding them better than anyone else. And when one team interprets the aerodynamic freedom perfectly, the field does not compress. It stretches. But there is another layer. Energy deployment. In Sector 2, where others experienced clipping, the RB22 maintained electric boost through the entire straight. No hesitation. No fade. Verstappen completed long runs with identical energy profiles lap after lap. Toto Wolff even described it as frightening. That word matters. Because when rivals start using that tone in testing, something structural is happening. And this is exactly where drivers began questioning the philosophy of the 2026 cars. If the sport becomes an energy optimization contest, not a racing instinct contest, what does that do to wheel-to-wheel battles? If one team never runs out of deployment down the straight, how do you attack them? How do you defend against them? And this was only block 1 of the story. Because what happened on day 3 made the situation even more uncomfortable for the FIA. Day 3 is where the silence became loud. Because long runs do not lie. Qualifying simulations can be disguised. Fuel loads can be hidden. Engine modes can stay locked. But race pace over extended stints exposes the truth. And what Red Bull showed on day 3 was uncomfortable. On the C3 compound, degradation was almost non-existent. Ferrari were losing half a second per lap after 8 laps. Verstappen maintained his lap times within a tenth for 15 laps. Think about that. Half a second versus a tenth. Over 15 laps. That is not setup luck. That is platform stability. The rear anti-squat suspension geometry kept the car stable under acceleration. Less rear tire slip. Less overheating. More control. And when tire degradation disappears, strategy opens up. You can extend stints. You can undercut without panic. You can control the race pace instead of reacting to it. Now connect this to energy deployment. While others were managing battery levels aggressively, lifting earlier into braking zones, the RB22 did not need cooldown laps to recharge. It maintained consistent electric boost lap after lap. That suggests superior recovery efficiency. Which means the car is not just fast. It is self-sustaining. And here is where the FIA's problem becomes clear. The 2026 regulations increased the electrical contribution dramatically. Recovery and deployment are no longer secondary tools. They are central performance pillars. If one team masters that pillar immediately, the competitive balance shifts instantly. Because you cannot copy hybrid architecture overnight. You cannot redesign recovery systems mid-season without consequences. And this is exactly what rivals are worried about. Then came another detail that raised eyebrows across the paddock. Observers noticed the floor edges looked almost too simple. Raw carbon. Minimal visible complexity. The theory circulating quietly is that Red Bull may have used a basic placeholder floor during testing. If that is true, then what we saw in Bahrain is not the final aerodynamic package. And if this is only the baseline, then the potential ceiling becomes frightening. Telemetry analysis added fuel to that suspicion. Verstappen appeared to lift noticeably in high-speed corners during his faster laps. Estimates suggest close to 0.8 of a second still in reserve. They never activated their full qualifying engine mode. So let us summarize what Day 3 revealed. Stable tires. Superior energy deployment. Highest top speed. Flawless reliability. And hidden performance. That is not a competitive edge. That is structural dominance. And now the uncomfortable question grows louder. If the regulation reset was designed to close the field, why does the gap look wider already? Because when one team arrives fully optimized in a new hybrid era, the cost cap protects them. Wind tunnel time restrictions slow challengers. Power unit architecture cannot be reinvented instantly. Which means the flaw exposed in Bahrain is not about legality. It is about design philosophy. Did the FIA unintentionally create a formula where the most prepared organization locks in advantage before the first race even begins? That is the tension spreading through the paddock right now. And this still leads to the final layer. Because what the drivers are feeling inside the cockpit may be the most revealing part of all. Now we arrive at the part nobody wants to say out loud. How these cars actually feel to drive. Because numbers tell one story, but drivers tell another. The 2026 cars demand constant energy management. Brake-by-wire mapping changes corner to corner. Harvest strategy affects entry balance. Deployment mapping affects exit traction. It is no longer just about attacking the apex. It is about calculating battery state every single lap. And several drivers left Bahrain frustrated. Not because Red Bull were fast, but because the driving style required by these cars feels restrictive. You cannot simply push flat out every straight. You cannot attack every braking zone without thinking about recovery targets. If you overdeploy early in the lap, you pay for it later. If you fail to harvest efficiently, you lose overtaking potential instantly. And in Bahrain, we saw what happens when one team solves that equation better than the rest. The RB22 never appeared to run out of electrical boost down the straights. Others did. That changes racing dynamics. Imagine lining up an overtake. You exit the corner perfectly. You move into the slipstream. But halfway down the straight, your battery level drops. The acceleration fades. The opportunity disappears. Now imagine the car ahead never suffers that drop. That is not just performance. That is control. And when control becomes this one-sided, frustration grows quickly. Max himself mentioned a slight issue with brake feel in extreme heat. Even in the most stable car of the test, complexity exists. Now imagine managing that system in a less balanced machine. It becomes exhausting. Physically demanding. Mentally draining. The hybrid era was already technical. But 2026 increases the electrical dependency dramatically. Which raises a philosophical question. Did the FIA push the balance too far toward energy optimization? Because if racing becomes a software contest rather than a wheel-to-wheel contest, fans notice. Drivers notice. And teams react politically. Combine that with what Bahrain revealed. Over 400 laps of flawless running. Superior energy recovery. Minimal tire degradation. Highest top speed of the test. Possible sandbagging close to 0.8. That is not just early dominance. It is early separation. And when separation appears immediately after a regulation reset, the governing body faces scrutiny. Because resets are meant to compress performance, not expand gaps. Now the FIA finds itself in a delicate position. Do they wait and see? Do they intervene if the gap becomes visible in race 1? Or do they defend the regulations and risk another prolonged era of one-team control? That is why Bahrain was more than testing. It was exposure. Exposure of potential structural imbalance. Exposure of a philosophy that may reward efficiency over aggression. Exposure of how quickly a prepared team can lock an advantage under cost cap constraints. And the real tension is only beginning. Because if race 1 confirms what Bahrain hinted at, The debate will move from quiet paddock conversations to full-scale public pressure. And at that point, the FIA will not just be managing a championship. They will be defending the future direction of Formula One itself. And now we reach the final layer. Because everything that happened in Bahrain builds toward one uncomfortable possibility. What if this is not just a fast car? What if this is the beginning of another locked era? Think about the pattern. Brand new regulations. Massive technical reset. New power unit philosophy. Electrical dependency increased dramatically. Cost cap restrictions limiting rapid development. And one team arrives fully prepared from day one. Over 400 laps completed. 0 reliability failures. Highest top speed of the entire test. Minimal tire degradation. Superior energy deployment. Possible hidden performance close to 0.8 per lap. That combination is not normal in a reset year. In a true reset, everyone struggles. Everyone experiments. Everyone looks vulnerable. Red Bull did not look vulnerable. They looked comfortable. And comfort at this stage is dangerous for the rest of the grid. Because catching up under these regulations is not simple. You cannot redesign your entire recovery architecture in a few weeks. You cannot suddenly discover aerodynamic efficiency that was not there in development. You cannot bypass wind tunnel limits. If the advantage is structural, it compounds. Race after race. Upgrade after upgrade. And here is where the FIA faces genuine pressure. If the gap becomes obvious in the opening races, the narrative will explode. Questions will be asked. Were the simulations accurate? Did the rules unintentionally favor one development philosophy? Did the governing body underestimate how decisive energy recovery would become? Because what Bahrain exposed was not a loophole. It was mastery. Red Bull interpreted the regulations better. They integrated the Ford power unit flawlessly. They optimized aerodynamic efficiency through innovative cooling exits. They stabilized tire behavior through suspension geometry. And they may still be hiding their true floor design. That is not luck. That is preparation meeting opportunity. But here is the real dilemma. If the FIA intervenes too early, it looks reactionary. If they do nothing, and dominance becomes visible, it looks negligent. That is the balance they must manage now. And for the drivers, the concern is more personal. They want to fight. They want unpredictability. They want margins measured in hundredths, not half seconds. Bahrain suggested margins that are wider than expected. So the story is no longer just about Verstappen. It is about the direction of Formula One. Has the sport tilted too far toward hybrid optimization? Has efficiency replaced instinct? Has the reset unintentionally strengthened the strongest team? Those are not small questions. They define eras. And if Race 1 confirms what testing hinted at, we may look back at these 3 days in Bahrain as the moment everything became clear. Not when the season started. Not when the first trophy was lifted. But when the data quietly revealed the future. And the real question now is simple. Did the FIA create the most advanced Formula One era ever? Or the most predictable one?